any second. We are live. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we are here for another installment of Leaders Insights. Myself, Nick Baxter of Baxter Williams and IsoNation. I am really pleased to be joined by a thought leader within the procurement space and someone I've known for a number of years and I always lean on for advice from a procurement perspective. We have Andy Neilson from Twisted Orange here. Good afternoon, Andy. Welcome to IsoNation and welcome to Leaders Insight.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for the invite. Much appreciated.
That's absolutely fantastic. Listen, you don't have to thank me for the invite. It's great to be able to engage with like-minded business professionals from a number of different sectors within a number of different specialisms, and we really appreciate your time and insight today. So listen, you don't have to thank me for anything. Before we go into anything, I just want to say to the guys out there, thank you very much for viewing and for checking in. We've got Rachel. Hi, Rachel. We got Mark, Thomas. Hi, Mark. Good to see you guys. So, Andy, when I asked you about IsoNation and asked you to come and be a guest of mine at Leaders Insight, I know you've watched a number of the shows now, actually, since we first spoke about it. And the aim of IsoNation, I was co-creator and co-founder with Rachel and Christian from Nifty Communications, and it was their baby. They kind of kindly brought me in on. I've been really grateful to have been involved in such a great, and I don't know what we really call it, movement, initiative, support, network, group, but whatever you'd like to tag it, because we're not too bothered about the tags. What we are keen to do is make sure that every week that we've been in lockdown, and actually today marks a significant milestone because the 100th day of lockdown in the UK, which is just absolutely crazy that this is the new normal that we exist in, has become so normal that it doesn't seem like it's been 100 days, but it has been 100 days. We wanted to create a collective. We knew that the shared experiences of organizations and leaders meant that there was some shared pain, and at a time of extreme worry and discord and discontinuity within businesses, we thought we'd create this supportive network, and it's been fantastic. We've had some phenomenal feedback, we've had some phenomenal comments, and we've reached nearly 400,000 people across a number of platforms, which has been phenomenal. We've done a number of ebooks, we've done a number of surveys, and we're continuing to support people. So your inclusion this week has been fantastic because we've had thought leaders within branding, within comms, within hospitality, within retail, within finance, within key workers. We've had a real broad spectrum, but we've not had anyone in procurement. So I'm looking forward to getting your take on procurement, supply chain issues, initiatives, and also that changing landscape and how you guys will help forge the links between organizations and their supply chain. So without further ado, I wanted to we always ask our guests to first introduce themselves, their business, and what they do, really. It'd be fantastic.
Okay, Nick, thank you. So I've been in procurement and supply chain, crikey, nearly 30 years. At the end, yeah, I know. At the end of 2017, I came out of corporate world and joined my wife in the business at Twisted Orange. And what we do in essence is we offer any organisation of any size support around commercial transactions, relationships, etc. So I specialise in, as you've already said, procurement and supply chain logistics. So I train procurement people. I support organizations. I focus on SMEs because I think that's where a lot of the benefit can come from. For my sins, I also train salespeople because that never seems to cross over. And in fairness, I think anything I can do to impart my knowledge of procurement onto whether it be future leaders or functions developing or organizations can only help. So I've been doing this now 2.5 years. I've been very lucky with the support I've got from my connections and friends and family. So I not only work within Twisted Orange, but I also work on behalf of other consultancies delivering training and solution delivery.
Beautiful. And you know what? So I know you professionally, and I know how blooming good you are within that space. I tell you what's great is that instead of procurement being an element of a business that's kind of hived away, looking after strategic purchasing, actually the fact that you're liaising with salespeople, because a lot of what everybody does in a business sense is a lot of negotiation, and until you've really been in some ingrained meeting with a procurement person, you've never really been through any level of negotiation. Let me tell you, I'm battle weary. I've got the scars to prove it. So it's actually really nice that you transfer across, and we'll talk a little bit more about the future benefits to enhancing some of that skill set within procurement and supply chain. But the fact that actually you're speaking to people who are front-ended customer engagers, i.e. the sales force, to be able to impart some of that knowledge. And I think it goes beyond that. I think from every element of a business, there should be a strong awareness, not just from a negotiation perspective, but from a procurement perspective. But as I say, we'll elaborate on that. First question I always ask is, what was your OMG moment? What was that moment that you had when, beyond the PR and press speculation of COVID-19 and Corona, that this situation was clearly here to stay and was going to be we're going to be feeling the impact for some time?
I think it was, to be honest with you, I was due to fly to San Francisco to assist with a customer delivery. And typically I was really looking forward to it. Until it was cancelled, because obviously the States closed themselves down. And I think that's when it really hit me in terms of, this is now fundamental change, not only in terms of the way we work, but the way we live. And so, yeah, I think that was kind of my OMG moment, as you'd call it. But pretty quick, you know, people and myself realised you have to adapt. Otherwise, you can't just sit there and feel sorry for yourself. You have to get on and still deliver, but in a different way.
It's a really good point. And because whenever you have that moment, which is like a life-changing event or some form of crisis or the impact leaves everybody shell-shocked. And what I have found from a business perspective, from a recruitment perspective, liaising with a whole host of other business leaders, I found there is some real disparity between the guys that have really attacked this head on and just dealt with and rolled with the punches and dealt with the blows, to some people who've just said, well, business as usual, we're just going to press pause and we're going to press play and we're going to be fine. And I'm just literally trying to get those guys to realize that is not going to work. And the fact that you said, the first thing you did was realize it's always holidays, business trips, it's always some form of travel or some form of sport. And we've had, 20 odd Leaders Insights, and each OMG moment revolved either something social with a beer or some entertaining or a trip away or something to do with sports. Because they're the things that get impacted the most, the normal, the stuff that we do outside of work, that's the stuff that gets impacted to make, we just take this for granted as something we can do. International travel, a holiday, a sporting event. It's something you take for granted so much that when this gets taken away from you, that's when the clarity starts to kind of ring home. So thank you for that moment. I'm just going to go back to, we've got Kelly Doolan. Thank you, Kelly Doolan. She said shared Glasgow, so I'm assuming she's in Glasgow. So lovely to see you, Kelly. If anyone else is from Scotland, we don't get many Scottish viewers, or at least we don't know. So if you are from Scotland, please let us know. Actually, if you're from anywhere outside of England, please let us know. It'd be really nice to find out how far we've gone. And we've got Rachel here, shared in Worcester. All right, brilliant, Rachel. Excellent. Thank you very much. So second question, Andy, is normally we ask this question from a perspective of business owners. And obviously yours is a bit convoluted because you've got a business and a consultancy, but you also work on behalf of other businesses. Yes. How did, in your experience, how did everyone initially react to what was going on? And, were there any precautionary measures that anybody took within your sphere of influence?
I think that the one thing that really came to light for me is there's obviously just two of us in the business here, but being involved with other businesses. And certainly the one thing that really came to the fore was the fact that almost the people matter approach. So it wasn't so much how do we carry on doing business, it's how do we carry on looking after our own people. And I saw other examples of that, but being involved in making sure I was okay, making sure the rest of the team that I was working with were okay. I think a lot of people will take learnings from this crisis in terms of how they were treated and how businesses behaved and how leaders behaved. And I think I've seen some really, really great examples. I think we've all seen some poor examples. Although in fairness, it's not impacted on me directly, thankfully. So what I did see is I saw people being very proactive in terms of how do we look after our best resource, i.e. our people. Then once they're looked after and supported, how do we then facilitate the relationship continuation, if you like, with clients and suppliers, etc. So
it's so interesting because there's two things you mentioned there which I would like to latch on. The first thing is people. So it's really bizarre because you said the first thing that people need to look after is their biggest resource, people. When you speak to a number of other organisations, they say the biggest resource is cash. And, it could be argued that it is, whether it's the biggest resource or most important. The fact that you mentioned people, it's really true. And as a recruiter, we're seeing a whole host of, I suppose, stories and examples and experiences of this situation, and organizations that have looked after their people very well through this, they're going to be bought. The level of engagement that gets bought from looking after people during times of crisis is amazing. Those that haven't, you better look out, because in the next 3 or 4 weeks when things open up, those scars and those memories and there's those poor experiences, people will look elsewhere. But that's another story. In fact, I probably need to do one around employee engagement post-COVID, actually, which is a great topic, but no one's going to want to listen to me for 40 minutes. Anyway, I'll flip it back to you and say the second thing that you mentioned there was, now you've got the people sorted out. And, I know what you mean. When you say the people, you mean the top 3 things: the cash, the resources, the process, and the people. Once you've got that sorted out, you're right. The supply chain then around suppliers and having those relationships, because everybody was told, this is where it became, in the SME environment, everybody was told, let's look for payment holidays. Let's look for payment holidays. Let's speak to our landlord, see if we can get payment holidays on our rent. Let's speak to anyone that's providing us with IT or telecom, see if we can get a payment holiday. Excuse me, VAT and national insurance, there was a payment holiday. What I'm worried about here is that when you ask for a payment holiday, it's someone else's business. And so the knock-on of organisations asking for payment holidays, and the reason I didn't do too many of those was we were in a quite fortunate position from a security perspective. But I'm a massive believer, you've got to pay it at some stage. So if you're in a situation to pay it now, at least don't do everything on a payment holiday, because you're going to leave yourself short September, October, when we all kind of hopefully come through this. Tell me a little bit about what kind of things people did straight away from a supply chain relationship, suppliers perspective. What
I think there was for me, there was some really great examples of building on strong relationships from customers back to suppliers. And just talking about payment holidays, actually the reverse, where some organizations were paying suppliers sooner because they recognized through their risk management the fact that the smaller suppliers, the SMEs, wouldn't necessarily hold up against the kind of downturn in trade, but also if you extended payment terms, they probably wouldn't survive at all. So I guess that the organizations that got that were able to have those discussions in an open and honest way. And I know lots of organizations that benefited from early payment to keep that cash flow going. And I think those organizations should be applauded. And in fairness, in the UK, I think the government's done a fantastic job, not bringing politics into this, but I've never seen a chancellor step up in the way that I've seen it in the last 100 days. For me, it really does bring home that relationship piece, the need for relationships between customers and suppliers, all the way through the supply chain. People buy from people, people sell to people. Whatever the industry, whatever the technology required, at the end of the day, that's what we do. And I think the people who will come out of this successfully are the people that looked after their upstream supply chains, as it were.
I love it. And it kind of leads on from what we talked about. People that looked after their people will benefit, the staff will benefit from a highly engaged workforce that will run over hot coals for an employer, or for leaders that stood by them and did the right thing by them at a time of crisis. Exactly the same thing. I agree. Organisations that have paid up front should be applauded. And we saw a little bit of that in the house building space, actually, where a number of the big PLC house builders were looking after the smaller SMEs, well, the smaller one-man bands, actually, you know, people who are subcontracting with three, 4 people. They live week by week, you know, having to wait an extra time meant that they you know, they probably weren't going to be here. So anyone, the next level, the next bit you talked about was the level of interaction between supply chain. We'll talk a little bit later around some of the great things that can come out of a crisis. You know, loss of life has been terrible, and some of the economic impact on organisations and livelihoods has been terrible. But there has been some really good things that come through, and actually, if we can have a legacy of some good things that emanate from some of the dark times or some of the difficult times, then that can only be a benefit for society moving forwards. But the human bit, we talked about the human bit, you know, in procurement particularly, you've got service line agreements, SLAs, you've got contracts, you know what it's like on a house building site. The delays, the penalties for late build is ludicrous, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds a day. You know, you've worked on, if you ever know anyone that's involved in Jaguar Land Rover, you know, if there's an issue with supply. I remember I worked with a client who worked in the upholstery space, and if there was an issue with their chairs being made at Jaguar Land Rover and there was a hiccup in production, it was tens of thousands of pounds a minute. It's ludicrous. And people would always hide behind those SLAs. And what I have found within procurement and beyond is that a lot of organizations have become a lot more human in the way they've interacted and they've understood and they've empathized. Would you agree with that, Andy?
Yeah, I think almost through necessity, some organisations they've developed a more collaborative approach. I think the true winners and the true leaders that people will see were the organisations that were already collaborating and didn't have to learn from scratch. I think the food industry is probably a good example where the retailers were desperate to keep the shelves full when people were panic buying. And the only way they did that was to collaborate with their suppliers. At times, I'm sure there's been some quite adversarial relationships supplying into retail. I'd like to think that both sides, if you like, would learn from this in terms of talking to each other and keeping the momentum going, as it were, around this collaboration. You know, don't just make it for a crisis. Continue, go forward and learn from the positives and the successes that the supply chain saw through retailer and supplier talking to each other. It could be any industry, but you know, retail springs to mind, and certainly in the food. So you know, I think again, it's about behaviours, isn't it? You know, procurement can be as technical as you make it, but at the end of the day, it's about relationships and it's about behaviours, and people respond to behaviours, whether that be negative or positive. And if those behaviours are positive, 9.5 times out of 10, both sides get what they want. And that kind of sums up procurement in a sentence for me. And that's what I base my career on, is relationships. Not always successfully, I'll appreciate. You know, not everybody can like you. But at the end of the day, there's this respect, if you like, commercial respect in relationships required on both sides. So
just some of the stuff you talked about there is it doesn't they're not normally words that come out of a procurement lead's mouth. And when you talk about behaviors, because you know, you said that procurement can be as technical or non-technical as possible, but it's the behaviors. No one doesn't have to like you. Not everybody's going to get on with everyone, but as long as everybody respects you, and they'll respect you based on those behaviors, because it won't just be, you know, I've got an employee engagement business, and we talk about values and organizations increasing their employer value proposition and having the values, but values don't mean anything if they're not underpinned by anything. And that's what you talked about. You talked about behaviors. So Netflix were really good. They've got these 9 core values. But instead of just having these core values that are strapline on somebody's website or part of their CSR budget or mandate, actually their behaviors that underpin those values. So we know that when you're operating in this way, you're reiterating those values, you're speaking about those values, you're epitomizing those values, you're living those values. And that's when you mentioned about behaviors, that's really insightful, because during any negotiation, there can be an aggressor, there can be someone more submissive, everybody wants to have a win-win, and I think you can have a win-win. But unfortunately, sometimes people's egos get in the way, history gets in the way, the larger versus smaller organizations get in the way. Actually, you should just cut through all the nonsense and make it all around values and behaviors. And I think I hope that's something that will come out in one of the books that one of the next books that we make for IsoNation. Because I think regardless of whether you're in finance, sales, marketing, procurement, operations, customer service, whatever you're in, it should be about those behaviors, because everybody's got to, and you made the lovely point before when you said, people like to deal with people. We've always known that. But actually what we're seeing as we come through this is this whole be kind message. It's not a political show at all, but you're right. The Chancellor's been really strong. The Prime Minister's been really. What we have done, though, regardless of your political influences, what we have done is we've acted, we've supported, and we've made things happen. In political systems where it takes so long for people to turn things around, it's a slow-moving liner in terms of making decisions and actioning. One thing we've done is we've really supported them. There's been action, and the flip side of that is around, be kind. Just be kind, and you can do business. You can still be shrewd. And you can still have an objective, but just be kind. Be mindful of the other person. And if everybody treated everyone the way they'd want to be treated in business as opposed to just in relationships, the boardrooms would be a better place. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this through rose-tinted glasses, but you made that point around behaviours. If everybody started aligning themselves to the right level of behaviours in every single interaction they have, trust me, everybody, supply chain would be a lot smoother. So, without us getting philosophical on each other, in terms of what I want to talk about now, we're in this semi-evolutionary state. Things seem to be moving a bit rapidly with lockdown easing, more business getting back to work. How are you finding your organisations kind of? We'll have to do some bloopers, Rachel and Christian, about how many times I'm saying navigating the landscape. But listen, it's true. How are people doing that at the moment in terms of navigating the landscape? As they get back to the new normal.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm working with some incredible clients, both directly and indirectly. And my personal experience is that they're almost grasping the opportunity that this crisis has provided, whether that be in terms of ways of working, whether that be in terms of creating agility in the supply chain or even innovation. So, and also recognizing that risk management isn't just about, I guess, a tick box exercise. Risk management is ensuring that you have resilience within your supply chain, whoever you are and wherever you are. And I think as we come out of this crisis, certain customers now are realizing that the supplier has the power, whether, it could be a shortage in the commodity, it could be anything really. And as opposed to, well, I'm the customer and therefore I'm right. A lot of the organizations now are realizing that they almost need to become a customer of choice of that supplier or those suppliers, because that's where true collaboration and relationship is almost shown, because the supplier wants to work with the customer as much as the customer wants to work with the supplier. So for me, organizations aren't coming back and saying, right, let's get back to normal as soon as possible. I think what I'm seeing is organizations are going, well, let's get back to doing what we should be doing, which is servicing the customer or servicing the consumer. But actually we can learn from how we've done this. We can create that flexibility and agility in the supply chain. We can learn the lessons. Some businesses will take 5 months to innovate a new product or change something in the supply chain. Whereas now, actually, they've proven they can do it in weeks rather than months. So, there'll be a lot of boardrooms and a lot of heads of departments going, well, I remember when you did it in this shorter time. So I don't think it's a question of making a rod for our own back. I think it's a question of we've demonstrated to ourselves that when push comes to shove, we can do something different, even down to video calls. I think a lot of organizations were reluctant to allow people just to have a Zoom meeting, and things had to be face to face, etc. So I think those behaviors will change as well going forward. But it's nice for me to see organizations that aren't hell bent on going back to what it was before, because I don't think they can, and two, in the cases I've seen, they don't want to because they're looking to learn from this.
And you know what, it's most leaders on this program have talked about remote working in terms of some of our archaic mindsets around flexible and remote working. That's got to change. You're right. You don't want to make a rod for your own back because you've been able to be agile and pivot to get things done quicker. You're not going to do them at breakneck speed, but you have now challenged the status quo, and there will be, alongside supplier relationships, alongside a whole host of business processes, there will be this new mindset of, well, you know what, actually, before we'd say, well, no, it just can't be done. It's never been done. It can't be done. Under duress, in a time of crisis, people get things done. It's almost like a war mentality of everybody clubbing together, creating some synergy collectively, moving forwards rowing in the right direction, to use the analogy, and making stuff happen. Now that takes some energy and that takes some time, and it's not necessarily conducive and to be consistently like that, but actually we know from time to time we can dig deep and make things happen. Adding on to that, from a cultural perspective, have you seen, from a culture and dynamics focus, have you seen what benefits have you seen amongst a lot of your client base around culture? Because you've talked briefly there about the mindset shift around flexible working. Anything else?
I think it's so a lot of my work is done face to face in terms of client delivery or training, and I think that mindset shift, if you like, has gone to being accepting of virtual training, which, let's face it, is a lot less intrusive than organising people, from all around the UK into a central location, and cost-wise and time-wise. And actually, the delivery of virtual training has all of a sudden taken on a huge leap forward in its ability to deliver what we wanted to deliver. And I think what I've seen is people don't say, well, this is the way we've always done it anymore, because they can't, because the whole world can't stop simply because we can't travel or communicate face to face. So I think, for me specifically around client delivery, this sort of technology will now form a dominant part rather than just a bit of an add-on going forward. And I think it opens up a global market. Living in Devon, you don't necessarily get the ability to go and access clients in Malaysia or Singapore or California that easily, but now you do. And almost it's driven an acceptance of this behavior and this skill set almost naturally, because people have had to adopt to it and had to adapt to it as well.
And do you think that'll carry on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I do. And I think we're in interesting times in terms of business travel, because you'll have organizations looking at budgets for obvious reasons, both from a customer and a supplier point of view. And a lot of businesses need business travel to open up quickly, and I fully appreciate that. I think, and I think that the work that Clive Ratton and the Business Travel Association are doing is absolutely vital. And I think they also recognise the fact that some people may not be ready to travel. Some people will not want to sit on a plane. There was a point raised to me last week on business travel, is whereas we've got economy, premium economy, business class, first class travel, we may end up now with two halves of a plane, which is tested and not tested. So,
wow.
If you've been tested, do you really want to sit on an A350 for 8 hours with somebody who hasn't been tested and take that risk? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a really fair challenge. And will organisations then almost force their employees to have to travel? And I don't know, but
Wow.
I think this technology is here to stay, and I think it will only develop positively, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think things are morphing, and nothing's going to go away. So whatever stage we're in right now in terms of testing and dealing with it and going back to work and social distancing and keeping people safe, to ensure that there aren't any spikes moving forwards, I think there's going to be a whole host of stuff that's going to change. And I think there's going to be a whole host of stuff that's going to be evolving. So you say, it sounds crazy. You sound like you're opening the can of worms when you talk about that half a plane. That won't be the half of it. There'll be even more. I think there are a couple of things that we really need to happen straight away. One, to find out that we can't get it twice. Because as soon as there's that finality that this strain and any other strain we're going to be safe. Once you've had it, you move into a whole new category, and then everyone else is around testing, and is around testing at a million different pinch points, so that if there's any spike in temperature, which I suspect will be what happens now, then it'll be you'll be taken somewhere else. So Worcester Rugby Club have been the first rugby club to have this thermal testing. So they've been training for the last couple of weeks, and apparently the corner of your eye, your retina or your eye, is the place where your temperature is most constant. So they're the first club that's been tested. So they get tested on the way in every morning. Any spikes, and boom. Luckily, everything's been fine.
Yeah.
But that's professional sport. It's not going to be long before you're not going to get on a bus before. And it's bizarre. Before it was retinal scanning for entry, but now it's going to be a similar thing, just so everyone can get on with it. And the thing that scares me, the whole 1999 analogy, is how this will just become the new normality. And we'll want it to be the new normality, because the sooner that's the new normality, the sooner we can get the economy going again, the sooner we can socialize, the sooner we can spend time with our loved ones and our family and hug and kiss and be tactile again. But you're right, that will change. I digressed slightly there. In terms of, as we moved into the last third of the show, I always ask people, what you're going to do when lockdown officially ends. It's been 100 days. So tell me what business-wise, what's going to happen to you once lockdown's finished? Because I know you've still been trading in some sort of semblance of the old normal and blended with the new normal. What will happen for you guys, Twisted Orange and the rest of your clients post lockdown?
I think for me, there probably won't be that much difference, because we've been able to carry on. I wouldn't say business as usual. It's been challenging, that's for sure. But for me, it will probably open up people's thinking again, because everything was, a lot of stuff was placed on hold, just in case. We'll come back to you, we'll look at it again. So I'd like to think that there'll be offers flooding in, maybe as a result of this, who knows? But you'd certainly like to think that there is a suppressed demand out there for every need, if you like. Not just in kind of procurement training or sales training or consultancy or relationship management support, etc. But yeah, I mean, I like millions of others just want the economy to start, if you like. And I think for me that organizations shouldn't be fearful of being the first or doing something different, or actually saying, right, we're going to grab this and we're going to run with it, because people will follow. People want, if you like, innovation and different ways of thinking. Locally, for example, maybe a silly example, but greengrocers delivering to houses would have been unheard of in East Devon 101 days ago. but they adapted. And it may be a small example, but it's it's scalable, isn't it? That's what the whole world is now doing, is adapting. So I think there's a degree of suppressed demand, certainly in my areas, if you like. I think there's a lot more suppressed demand for probably retail products, as probably seen from the queues to B&Q when that opened. So yeah, I think people are confident. You're going to get two sorts of people. People who are going to say, do you know what, I'm going to go out and spend money because I haven't had a chance to do so. And others are going to say, oh, I'm just a bit wary, so I'm going to keep on. I don't think there's any middle ground, really, either or. So yeah, I'd like to think that we can create a degree of resilience, if you like, going forward. Because if there is a second spike, we're gonna have to learn from the first.
100%, yeah, and fingers crossed that won't happen. As long as human beings are sensible, which unfortunately we don't have a great track record on that, do we? But I'm hoping that we're just a little bit more sensible and make decisions with our head as opposed to our heart. In terms of procurement, how do you think that can? And you touched upon it in a couple of points earlier. How can procurement assist post-lockdown organisations?
I think for me, procurement is all about realising value. I think procurement functions have moved on significantly in the last probably 10 years or so. Certainly when I first started my career in procurement in Worcester, it was very transactional, old school, if I win, you lose sort of thing. I think procurement now is about the relationship piece and risk management and collaboration. But the key thing for me is that realization of value. How do procurement allow the supply base to bring innovation into their business? Because at the end of the day, it's the suppliers who've got the expertise, not necessarily the retailers or the manufacturers. The suppliers have that business for a specific reason. So procurement is all about realizing those opportunities and giving them the platform to deliver something a little different. Otherwise, you're always going to do the same thing. So I think procurement needs a seat at the top table. I think it needs to be part of that corporate strategic overview and initiative, and needs to be held accountable for delivery against those strategic initiatives in terms of what value procurement bring, not just cost savings, but in terms of how they're viewed by suppliers, how they source. Sustainability is something that we haven't touched on to date in this conversation, but procurement have a massive responsibility around sustainability, because we in effect can make or break that supply chain. And I think we in procurement take great pride in the fact that we have ethical standards to follow. So I think, a long-winded answer to your question, I think procurement have a lot to do and offer almost a multifaceted basis. But it shouldn't just be seen as they'll go and get me stuff and I'll use it.
Yeah. And you know what? I agree. Having recruited a number of procurement roles, as you well know, over the years, and having a good understanding beyond the old school buyer, purchaser role, there are a lot of organisations, particularly SMEs, and it's so bizarre. One of my clients has got a steel business, and he had his production manager looking at some bits and pieces recently, and his production manager opened up, they haven't got a procurement team, opened up some amazing cost savings, not just basic cost savings, but efficiencies on supply chain, on suppliers, that actually is thinking about moving him into a role into a procurement role. What would you say to organisations that haven't got a dedicated procurement function, recognise that procurement is is probably somewhere the business needs to be, because once you grow, you recognize that you need that function. It's like a finance or a HR function. You can outsource it or have a minimal function, but as soon as your organization scales to a certain size, it's something that needs some continual focus. What would you say to those organizations that know it's something they need to do but don't know what to do?
I think for me, this may come across as a bit of a sell me message for obvious reasons, but I've worked in small and medium and large organizations. I think as an SME, if you don't have that resource or budget, you don't necessarily need to employ somebody full time. A lot of what I do, for example, is almost a health check. So you go into an organization, you follow the supply chain, you talk to the suppliers, and you come up with recommendations around, well, you're not going to have somebody permanently, but here's what you can do. Here are the processes. Here's the way of working. Here's the structure around your supplier relationships. Here's how you negotiate on a collaborative basis. Here's how you can deliver innovation, etc., etc. And then what myself and many like me can offer is that touch base solution where you don't need to employ me, but I'm there should you need me, whether it be on specific projects, whether it be just as that revisiting of a health check. So I think one thing I do see is a lot of people think they can naturally buy, and that's not being derogatory to non-buyers before you get floods of emails. But with anything, it is a profession, and there's many things a professional buyer can bring to organizations that, say, a business owner or general manager or director won't be able to focus on, because they've got other things to do. They've got the running of the business, they've got the customer relationship piece, etc., to manage and worry about. And therefore, I feel in some cases procurement just gets knocked down into, well, I do that anyway. So I think for any SME, it doesn't hurt to pick the phone up or send an email or make an inquiry, because that first contact's always free. Help doesn't always cost money. To your point of earlier, whilst we all need to make a living, there is a massive push, around the kindness approach, if you like, and helping each other. So that would be my recommendation: is speak to somebody, see what they would recommend. If you don't like it, that's okay, but it's the same as if you were putting a sky dish up. I wouldn't know where to start, and I wouldn't want to climb a ladder. So, by the same token, why would you do the procurement yourself? So that's the kind of way I look at it.
And it's the only way to look at it. As a recruiter, it's really difficult, because most owner-managed businesses are megalomaniacs that have literally control freaks that have started their baby from scratch. I'm one of them, so it's not. I'm speaking from example, but sometimes you just have to ask, don't you? And as you say, you want to put a sky dish up, you don't do it yourself, and sometimes ask. I think what we're finding, and to conclude our interview, I always ask someone, loss of life has been terrible, impact to business has been devastating. There has been some really good stuff that have come through, and out of the crisis, you want that legacy to stay there. Being kind is one thing, and as you say, asking, picking the phone up, people are collaborating and partnering and giving their time up and just being a bit more human. If you were to tell me the one thing, just to end the interview, if you tell me the one thing specifically for either to your industry or socioeconomically that you think is going to come out of the tough time that we've been in over the last few months, what would it be?
I think it's the importance of hairdressers.
Have you seen the grey in my hair? I know exactly. I know the feeling.
I thought it was a deliberate one there. But I guess for me, those of you that know me, appreciate that, I don't suffer from the best of mental health. And for me, what the last 100 days has shown is that there are some amazingly, genuinely nice people out there who look after, have your back, contact you and check in with you. And for me, I would like to think that the world would become a lot more cognizant of the fact of people with this illness aren't lepers or failures. And actually being nice doesn't cost anything. Quick text doesn't cost anything. And I like to conclude this by saying I've seen very much the best in people in my circles of friends, family, but clients and colleagues. And I'm rubbish at expressing stuff like this, but for me, you know, I'd love the world to be more accepting of people who are different and look to support instead of put down. And I think, as bizarre as this may sound, I've seen so much good in the last 3 or so months directed towards me that it's had a positive impact on me in spite of all the horrendous and sad issues that we faced.
That's beautiful. You know, first of all, we couldn't have talked about this. Two men couldn't have talked about this 10 years ago on a show because it just wouldn't have been cool and it just wouldn't have been acceptable for us to share that. Really honest. The checking in mentality is really the whole social. I didn't know who my neighbours were 2 doors down, but the clapping for the NHS on a Thursday, I've got to speak to neighbours that we always say hi. No one knows anyone. We just see each other. The checking in mentality and the sense of community spirit has been amazing. And as you rightfully said, and really brutally honestly said, you know, it was really nice that people have checked in. It doesn't take a lot for people to check in. It doesn't take a lot for people to pick the phone up. And I don't want anyone to feel guilty about any good that comes out of this. Because listen, at the end of the day, you'd rather something good come out of this terrible situation than it just to drag on and be an endless nightmare. You want some good to come out of it. And actually, with what's been going on around the world, it's not a political program at all, but what's been going on around the world, to end on, you know, if we could be kind, if the world could be a kinder place, it'd be better in contract negotiations, in recruitment, in financing, in banking covenants for new business and to help people continue trading. If just people just understand and they're a little bit kinder, the world would be a better place. Andy, it's been a pleasure catching up with you. As usual, it's been great. I want to say a big thank you to everyone. Gemma's just said, not bizarre, Andy. That's wonderful. Love all the positive actions and kindness I've seen, which is amazing. I don't know if Stuart, one of your buddies, Stuart Enu, said, try saying mindset shift 3 times quickly. Mindset shift. No, I'm going to swear. Thanks very much to everyone that's checked in. It'd be really nice if we can all make that difference. We're all going through our own collective troubles and cauldron of challenges. I think if we all do it with a smile on our face and for the betterment of our fellow man and woman and be kind, I think we'll all get through this a lot quicker and with a lot less battle scars. So on that note, I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone from myself, Nick Baxter, Baxter Williams and IsoNation, Andy Neilson of Twisted Orange. It's been a pleasure having you on and see you later. See you later, guys. We'll see you at the next show.
Thanks, Nick.